I was at a property in New Jersey and we met the owner and, he was considering using ButterflyMX. He just mentioned how, every month, one of his maintenance people had to meet the fire alarm or the sprinkler inspector, right? And it was just like, he spent an hour driving to this property to meet this guy, to let him in, and then would have to stay there while the guy was wandering around the property. This was crazy. There was no need to do this. We could solve that problem.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Multifamily Chronicles. Our special guest today is Cyrus Claffey. Welcome to the show, Cyrus.
Thank you, Adrian. Happy to be here.
Cyrus is the founder of ButterflyMX. Cyrus, please walk us through your journey from creating ButterflyMX. What did it look like back when you started it and where we are today? Walk us through your journey.
Well, how much time do you have? My background was I started out in investment banking and I started out doing a lot of telecom and internet, infrastructure build out during the dot-com era. After 9/11 got laid off, as a lot of people did because the industry contracted, I kind of stumbled into prop tech because somebody I had met through kind of networking was focused on doing in-building Wi-Fi. And I could immediately say, wow, in-building Wi-Fi, that's going to be huge because Wi-Fi allowed you to kind of use your internet connected devices without having to plug into a wall, which probably some of your listeners don't remember you had to do back in the day. That was the original reason to have Ethernet. That company didn't really have a great business model, but I did get very much enamored with in-building technology. I'd always been kind of the person in my family who, when they need something programmed, I would be assigned a task. And so I started a geek squad for the real estate industry, right? Because this was during the condo boom in New York in the 90s. And like every developer was looking to put a lot of sizzle into their developments because obviously that helps drive sales. It was from that kind of perch that I started working on some multifamily deals, and in particular for Avalon Bay, that was doing its first urban infill deal in West Chelsea, New York. I was also living in Brooklyn at the time in the first market rate unit of this apartment building that I loved, my apartment. It was a 3-bedroom, fully renovated. I was paying nothing in rent relative to what, other people were paying that I knew who were friends. When I say it was renovated, I mean, it was like, Viking stove, really nice KitchenAid, fridge, et cetera, et cetera. Everything had been done except for one thing, the intercom. Okay. The intercom was the same intercom that had been installed in like 1960. Okay. And it was connected to every other intercom unit in the building because that's how like the network topography of an intercom is laid out. And so the reason it had not been upgraded is because I was the only market rate unit in the building. Everybody was either rent control, rent stabilized. So it didn't make economic sense for the landlord to rewire the whole building, install all this hardware in every apartment. I was like, wow, this thing is terrible. I could never hear who was coming in the front of the building. I would, get buzzed. I would hit all 3 buttons, door, talk, listen, and, the door would open magically, so to speak. And so really a light bulb went off in my head, Adrian. I was like, this is such a terrible experience. You could stream FaceTime onto your phone. You were able to watch live action sports on your iPhone because the iPhone was fairly new at that time, right? And so it kind of opened up a whole new world of possibility in streaming, just the same way it did in music and other applications. I could never get my friends in or know if I got my friends in. I could never get my packages if I wasn't home. And so you could stream. And I was like, listen, I'm working in real estate. I know that look and feel is so important. Why can't you just put an iPad on the front of a building, right, that essentially makes a video call to your smartphone? And I was like, this thing could be a game changer because guess what? You would eliminate all the wiring required in the building. You would eliminate all the in-unit hardware. Why? Because people would bring their smartphones. And oh, by the way, smartphone is way better device than anything like some intercom manufacturer was going to deliver. And so that was really the beginning of the journey, and Avalon Bay, as luck would have it, when we said to them, listen, we've got this great idea. How would you like to put essentially a touchscreen in the front of the building, that'll make a video call to people's phones. And they can be anywhere, by the way. They could be in Europe. They could be in California. They could be in their apartments. They love that idea, right? And so, as you can imagine, from that, it was just kind of upward trajectory, year over year over year. And, we learned so much as we kind of grew. Being kind of a New York-based company, it was very important not to be New York centric because, obviously I think a lot of companies get founded here. People are like, it's such a unique beast. New York's an outlier in terms of how you lease apartments, what the per square foot, rental is, all those different things, right? So we were very much not New York centric. We were always focused on multifamily, writ large, kind of enterprise multifamily. We started going to the NMHC OpTech kind of gatherings in 2013. So that was always kind of our market that we focused on serving. But one thing is didn't kind of occur to us till we started really selling outside New York is in New York, every building has one entrance. Okay. You go to any typical property, right? Kind of some mid-rise deal. They may have two, they may have three, who knows? And we'd never even thought of that. So it was very kind of fun to kind of come upon these new challenges. What happens if one person gets calls from three different intercoms? How do you sort all of that out? So it was really a really fun experience and had a great team. And today we've gotten to be about 280 people. And I'll tell you, so wonderful because, for example, I was in France at my old boss's birthday party and I'm south of France actually. And so I'm talking to somebody, oh, you should meet this guy. He's from New York. We start talking, oh, what do you do? I work in real estate tech. Oh, I live in this building on the Upper West Side. The only thing we have is this intercom system. I was like, ButterflyMX? He was like, yes. How did you know? So it's kind of it's gotten to this point, wherever I go, there's some, 6 degrees of separation to ButterflyMX. And that's just really, it makes me feel so wonderful. That's kind of the truncated version of the origin story.
Cyrus, I want to ask you to define smart access. What is the smart access in your vision? And why is it relevant in today's environment?
Yeah, look, what is smart access? It's about cloud-based access control. You're basically managing the system via a web interface, a web dashboard, right? That you as a property manager or user can access from anywhere in the world, okay? Because it's cloud-based, right? The traditional access control systems have all this expensive head-end equipment that's on site, right? Requires a lot of maintenance, a lot of updates. Every time there's a software update, somebody needs to go on site, interact with that piece of hardware. With the cloud-based infrastructure, right? All the updates are very simple. You're eliminating all that on-site hardware, right? So in terms of upfront capital cost, you've eliminated a tremendous capital cost, which often creates a barrier to adopting best-in-class technology in your building, right? And then the other thing is, because the maintenance is so much simpler, you've also reduced the kind of ongoing cost of having a smart access system. So then that allows you to kind of benefit from all these cost savings. By the same token, smart access, it's the user is using a mobile app. So they're using their smartphone, which they're using for their banking, their music, their social media, and all the other things that we do with our smartphone, right? So they're using their smartphone in order to get around the building, to open and unlock doors, to send things like virtual keys to visitors or their dog walker or whomever, right? And so because of that, it also allows the property manager to manage the property so much more easily, right? You set up these workflows where, hey, guess what? On day one, somebody's moving into the building. They have access to the freight elevator, they have access to the front entrance, and they have access to their unit. So it simplifies a lot of the tasks that property managers have to kind of do on a daily basis that rely on access control. And so it creates a tremendous amount of cost savings from the reduced upfront capital costs and reduced ongoing costs to maintain the system, but also creates a much better user experience. And I think one of the things we are most proud about, Adrian, is that ButterflyMX was the first company to create a consumer-centric access control platform, right? And it was very much in the Steve Jobsian kind of, way. In other words, this is something that people like think about an intercom, right? You go buy an intercom multiple times a day. Before ButterflyMX, you never thought about it, right? It was just this piece of metal, right? Often didn't work, right? That you would go buy every day. Instead, we said, like, look, think about all the benefits that a good working system can help you with, right? Again, my original kind of use case, if you will, was I kept not getting my packages. So I'd have to go down to the post office, right? And spend all that time and, whatever, every Saturday. Well, now all of a sudden I can always get my packages. In fact, not only that, but I can get my dog walker in whenever they need to get in. And I don't need to worry about the key handoff because I can do everything electronically. Same thing if I'm a building manager, right? I don't need to worry about letting in the UPS guy or, letting in different vendors. I can automate all of that. So I've basically freed up a lot of my time and as a result, kind of mental space to deal with kind of other things that may be more critical in terms of managing the building to maximize occupancy or just drive efficiency in the building, right? So by being this consumer-centric product, I think that was a game changer in the security industry because everybody was really more worried about keeping bad guys out versus how do you keep the bad guys out, but how do you make sure you let the good guys in, right? Because it's a better quality of life, a better user experience. And so that's really been part of our DNA throughout the whole ButterflyMX journey as we've expanded, right? And it's really helped kind of be a North Star in terms of what we do and why we do various things. Now, so that's kind of some of the background of us. Why does this make sense? Well, look, I think that, as I mentioned, just from a ROI perspective, right? You're reducing upfront capital costs. You get a tremendous amount of benefits in terms of time savings at the property with things that the property manager doesn't need to do because you can automate it, right? And just one example of that is with a traditional telephone entry system. Somebody moves in, you got to go into the telephone entry system and type in that name. They move out, you're going to delete that name, right? Oh, by the way, if you don't do it, then you got to hire somebody to do it. So one way or the other, it's costing you either time or money or both, right? And actually what happens more often than not is people they don't eliminate those names. So at the end of the day, there's a ton of people in your telephone entry system who no longer live there, but who still have access to the building, right? And just when you think about how about this? Okay, I got a vendor coming into the building. I got to meet them and give them a metal key to get into the unit, or I got to physically give them a key fob. Well, look, what I love about this podcast is you've got that hands-on experience of what it's like doing key management. I mean, okay, how much time does it take to verify that this is the Time Warner guy or verify that this guy is who he said because he's been brought there through some work order, give him the key, and maybe somebody's got to walk him down somewhere or not. But it's all that back and forth. There's an emergency every day at a building. So how many times in a week is the on-site staff having to go through all this back and forth? These are just emergencies. Then you got things like unit turns, all this stuff. So think about all the amount of time that is kind of taken by the on-site staff, not just for key management, but it's door management. Okay. So, I mean, this just adds up. And this is non-productive time. Your maintenance guy is not really designed to be kind of a security guard who's kind of, having to walk people through different doors or register people and do all. If you can automate that, right, you have now freed up all this time. So in my mind, the time savings from automating things presents a very quick payback in terms of the capital cost to implement one of these systems. So it's very much a clear ROI. And, I'll kind of put this to you. Okay. You're spending, I don't know, $30-50 million. Okay. To buy, I'm not exactly sure what the price per apartment is today, but, to buy a 125 to 250 unit building, spending 150,000 to 200,000 to kind of update some of your infrastructure to drive these efficiencies and create a better user experience that you're meeting your today's renter, which is more often not younger millennial, right, who's using their smartphone. You're kind of meeting your consumer where they are today. That makes the units more attractive. It makes the building more attractive because the living experience is better and more what they expect or would want to have. Boom. To me, that completely pencils out.
I love the consumer centric product and approach that you have. And I want to speak about a different consumer out there, a different
Okay.
end user, which is, the service team, the maintenance team. You mentioned that a couple of times during our conversation. And also let's say the leasing team. I'm thinking about the benefits of, having direct access, like, not having to manage keys, not having to do management for anybody on a maintenance team. So let's think about, the technician that shows up in the morning, grabs 5 or 10 service requests. They also grab the keys for those apartments. While they're out on a property servicing one apartment at a time, there's someone else that might need a key for a different apartment that they have that key for. So this is when the key chasing begins. And then you have a keyboard person, or you have the pest control person, and you have the leasing person getting involved too. They had to call a leasing agent, had to call the maintenance person. Hey, where you at? We need this key because we have the pest control person here. This is like almost a daily occurrence in property management, in multifamily management, chasing down keys. I'm also thinking about the leasing agent having to grab an ID from a vendor, giving them a key, getting it from the vendor, and then the ID back. A leasing agent's main role is to sell apartments and to service existing residents. When you take, an hour or even more out of their time, especially during the heavy season, the heavy turn season, June, July, you're going to see a long line of, vendors waiting for keys or waiting to return keys because there's only one or two leasing agents, and they had to be on a phone and their prospects and their current residents, and also they have to help those vendors. Imagine eliminating all that traffic from the office so your leasing agents could focus solely on just the residents and prospects. How much of a value is that? And I do want to ask you, Cyrus, do you have any case studies that are showing time-wise or money-wise or both how much time a solution like yours can save your customers?
Yeah, listen, 100% across the board on everything that you just said. And by the way, I think like one of the things is investors, right? The money guys don't always understand exactly what you're talking about. It's not necessarily like hard costs. This is like soft costs, right? All that time, and especially when you think about like the summer is peak unit turn time, right? And by the way, the longer that backs up, right? The longer it takes to bring a unit back onto the market. I mean, there's all these like knock-on effects, right? Which they don't always see when they're looking at the spreadsheet, but which is the reality of the on-site teams, their day-to-day reality. So for us, this is exactly what it is that we want to tackle. And especially, by the way, you got to chase the guy down to get the key back, right? And like he could have like wandered off site and left the property without even thinking about it. So all these kind of, it's like death by 1,000 cuts in terms of how your time gets kind of sunk into just doing stuff that's not really value add, A, and B, which technology, right? The technology like ButterflyMX or, some of our other companies doing this can help eliminate at the property, right? And so for us, Adrian, this kind of problem was really one of the reasons. Like, look, we started as the intercom at the front of the building, okay? And what's so kind of interesting is everybody inside the building starts at the front. So they have to go through the front entrance. They use our platform, right, with the initial access into the building. And so really, like our customers came to us and said, look, we can assign delivery pins to UPS, FedEx, Amazon, you name it. And they were like, this is great. It's a game changer in how we're like managing delivery people coming into the building, right? And oh, by the way, everybody listening, we create this audit trail so you can see when they came in, and it's kind of a wonderful thing. The thing though, they said is like, look, can you, like once they get in, if they can't complete the delivery, can you create a package room where they can drop off the packages, right? And we were like, absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So we created a package room product, right? So you get in, then you put it in the package room if you can't make the delivery. Same thing with elevator controls, right? So a lot of elevators, especially new construction, they're key fob now. All right, so you order food, right? It's coming into your building. You're all comfortable in your apartment. Now all of a sudden you have to come downstairs to meet the food delivery guy. Terrible, right? Terrible kind of user experience. So we developed elevator controls that would unlock a key fobbed elevator, allowing the delivery guy to only go to the floor where that resident lived. I mean, but it was like that type of thing, which came from property management, regional managers, owners, developers saying, can we expand the platform? So we've gradually expanded it now to common area access, back of house access with the key fobs and so on, to the unit doors, right, with different smart locks and now parking. So we do the entire building. And part of the reason is because what we realize is with all those kind of use cases you talked about with the maintenance team, right? Whether it's them having to perform maintenance requests inside the building or having to meet like the third party vendors. Again, it could be, as you said, pest control guys coming biweekly, right? Or what about the once a month sprinkler inspector? Like I've heard stories of, I have to send a guy from the main office to go meet that sprinkler inspector and like walk around the building with him, or at least give him access because there's no other way to do it, right? Or as you said, like people coming there to do all the unit turns, like, and they have to go into the leasing office. And by the way, they don't make 50 keys. Oh, and how about this? You got to swap out the cylinder from the last resident, right? Right? And then you have all these keys you got to give to the unit turn people. You got to get them back, right? Sometimes you got to get them back every day, right? And then you got to put it in a new cylinder. I mean, the back and forth, it's like, it's their human key trackers as opposed to actually doing their main job. They spend so much time there. So this is the thing of like, where all these things, it's like 5 minutes on this side of the transaction, 5 minutes on that side of the transaction. That's 10 minutes. You multiply that by, 15 transactions. All of a sudden, it's 150 minutes. That's like 2.5 hours of somebody's day when they could have been doing other things, right? And so, especially when you're looking at this environment, as you said, you've managed huge teams, multiple buildings, portfolios, right? So the only way to, I think, manage this stuff is to really start to think, okay, how can I tackle this problem? You have to make an investment. You want to become a doctor, you got to go to med school. You got to make an investment in yourself, but on the back end, it's going to pay off. If you want to deal with some of these things, because again, these are not huge value add problems. It's death by 1,000 cuts. So if I invest in upgrading my smart locks, putting in some amount of smart access where I can reduce that amount of time to a minimum, then I can start to recoup savings on the back end when my on-site teams don't need to be doing this on a day-to-day basis, right? For us, this is the mission that we see where we can drive so much impact and improvement in the building. Because remember, ButterflyMX is yes, it's about creating a great user experience. Well, guess what? Property managers are users as well. Maintenance teams are users as well. Leasing teams are users as well. Let's improve their jobs, right? Just as much as we're improving the residents' ability to get their friends in for the Super Bowl party in the amenity space.
It's quite remarkable, right? And it goes beyond. I want to pick up on what you just said earlier. There is not just hard cost, right? But it's also soft cost. The soft cost I'm envisioning is the cost of having happier employees and happier residents at a property. That's a result of a frictionless experience for them. In other words, not having that key, not having to interact with another person to gain that access. You could actually have direct access, without interacting with a person, sometimes with more than one person. That creates a frictionless experience. And it's something that, we see in a world out there, done by the Ubers of the world, done by the Amazons. You just go on your phone, you order whatever you like. Couple of hours later, it's by your door. Or the next day, you order your rides with Uber. If you live in a city, a lot of times you don't even have to own a car. And it's not so much that, it's cheaper than owning a car. I think it's the experience is very valuable. A lot of people just embrace this because of the experience, not necessarily because of the cost savings. So it doesn't even come down to money. It comes down to experiences, like you were saying.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think managing access in your building, it should flow as easily as water coming out of your faucet, right? It should be that frictionless, that easy for the people managing the system. And I think, like, look, again, for us, the resident obviously is king, right? But so is the people on the on-site team, right? We want to make their jobs easier. We want to take all the routine drudgery. The reason you have package lockers and package rooms in every single building in the United States, right, is because there was an overflow of packages. The delivery companies were like, "Hi, here you go. Here's 100 packages." I mean, like we see that, and it's still going on today, right? So the solution was to start to develop a variety of different ways to store and manage those packages, right? So what we're doing in the world of access is very much the same. There's all these things that people don't see, and it's kind of a lot of the back of the house stuff. And it's not only, Adrian, I think the actual kind of giving people the keys and so on. It's also just having like a dashboard, right, that allows you to see things from the end to end where things are, so that it's well organized, so that if there is ever some sort of anomaly or you don't get something, it's easy to manage and to kind of, and it integrates with other systems like the PMS or whatever it may be, right? So for us, that's very, very important, is to make the lives of the on-site team so much easier, because, as you said, if they're less stressed about these things or doing stuff that's like routine, which is really more of a time sink. I'm driving half hour across town to meet somebody when I could have just sent them a virtual key, right? I'm having to chase somebody down or verify something that could have been done automatically. Well, that just kind of adds up and demoralizes a lot of the on-site staff, especially when they know that there's a better way to do things.
Cyrus, when it comes to technology, part of what I experienced in the past is that older communities, older assets don't integrate very well with technology, right? Just because, the way they've been built and everything. And sometimes it's really challenging to bring new technology to an old building. How does ButterflyMX solves that challenge?
I think there's two ways. So it really depends on how old that building is, Adrian. So, for example, with our key fob system, the main cost, I think, in a retrofit is the wiring cost, because it's the labor involved in running a wire from point A to point B. Some material cost as well, because Ethernet, or is typically, it's made with copper and so on. But that's more of a detail. But it's really the wiring cost, which is the main driver on doing a retrofit. So again, depending on the age of the building, we can often reuse the existing wiring in place, and then you're just replacing the head end equipment, right? Which, because it's cloud-based, there's not a lot of head end equipment, frankly. It's very minimal light footprint. And then maybe you're replacing the key fob reader at the door, and you may want to put in a keypad because it's easier for visitor access, right? But with that, you're able to upgrade the access control system. And the same thing, like with our intercom at the front of the building. At the time when we launched ButterflyMX, there were all these telephone entry systems, right? That was the standard that most multifamily properties used. So we designed ButterflyMX to be able to retrofit on a typical wiring bundle for telephone entry systems, right? And that turned out to be kind of a huge thing to do, because it allowed retrofits to be done fairly easily. That's not always the case, though, that you can reuse the existing wiring, right? And so what we also did is, we've invested tremendously in terms of our support functionality. We have about 80 people in our support function, and it really starts at the beginning of the customer lifecycle. So we have what's called our solutions architecture team. What they focus is really, look, if you've got an existing asset, all right, how can we kind of map to your existing infrastructure, right? And what's the minimum kind of change you need to make in order to be able to retrofit your building for ButterflyMX? And if it's fairly light, then that's great. But if it's more extensive, we then actually really come up with the bill of materials and work with the installation company. We have a national network of installers, right? To figure out the easiest way to retrofit your building. And then we take that all the way through, to our coordination people. We have a IPM installation project management team who basically say like, look, property managers, again, this goes back to caring about the property manager and trying to be a support to them versus kind of an additional burden that I think, sometimes, right? Ownership makes a decision. It's up to the on-site team to implement it, right? Well, we want to support the on-site team. So when it comes to the installation of our devices, we drive the coordination between the installer and the property manager where they're just signing off on things, but we do all the heavy coordination for them. So it's through doing that we really try and kind of make it as smooth and as simple as possible to retrofit to the building.
From an access standpoint, we have a lot of touch points throughout the property. We're talking about front door. We're talking about entrance gates, common areas, elevators, amenity spaces, package room, clubhouse, gym, swimming pools. What does access control look like throughout the property from a ButterflyMX standpoint? What's the ButterflyMX experience here?
Yeah. I mean, look, our motto is we make access simple. For us, it's number one, it's being able to give you one platform for every single thing that you just talked about. And when you think about it, it's like if you could have one platform for everything, you've simplified the amount of like training that's required. You've simplified like the amount of times you need to switch out into different systems. Think about all the times when you go to a building and it's like, I'm here to repair something on the rooftop, and they have to give you like 2 or 3 different key fobs to get there, right? Or 2 key fobs and a metal key. It's all eliminated, right? And the best thing is it's all being done on the mobile app or your smartphone. So you don't even need to get those keys. And again, as we've been talking about, you don't even need to meet that vendor because we have a whole vendor access module where, so if you've been pre-approved as a vendor, then you're allowed to have access to the various parts of the building wherever the property manager wants you to go without having to actually meet that guy, right? I mean, this is the ultimate of where we think all buildings need to be going, right? Where you don't need to meet the guy because he's been pre-approved, he's been background checked, he's already in your ButterflyMX system. So let him go where he needs to go. But essentially, it's one platform that gives you access anywhere in the building. So it simplifies kind of the user experience. Residents love it, right? But it also simplifies your management experience. Because also remember, day one, we started integrating with property management systems because one of the huge complaints you would get on telephone entry systems is like, look, I got to sit there and update it, right? Or I got to call the low voltage guy to come in and update it. And more often than not, it just didn't get updated, right? So now you don't need to think about it. You just like, move-in date, name appears, person getting it around the building, move-out date, they're gone. It's that same philosophy in terms of having one platform. Now you don't need to worry about adding one guy to multiple databases because there's only one database and we do it for you, right? Automatically. So that's kind of the crux of it. It's also obviously you're paying 3 different bills, to 3 different companies. And we know when you're kind of buying things from 3 different companies, it's going to cost you more than if you're paying one platform for everything. So from our perspective, we really think that this is the future that buildings are going for. And when you look at new construction, more often than not, they're choosing a platform like ours to do everything. So for us, we're all about adding more things because we know that that's a better way to operate the building more efficiently. And like, look, we're going to touch on centralization here in a moment, but again, if you really want to implement centralization, the most efficient way to do it is you've got one system that works across every door in the building. If you've got like 3 systems, okay, so you're going to be able to centralize a third of what it is you need to do. You're still going to have some kind of handoff to people, or you're going to create friction that slows down the efficiency gains, right, that you would otherwise get from one system. So
you mentioned centralization. I want to go next to building centralization and discuss the structure of centralization. How do you envision it from a service provider side, and why do you think it's popular?
So look, this is a great question. There's a lot of things going on today. Why it's popular? Let's just start there. It's been such a hot labor market. It's hard to find people. Like you have people aging out of multifamily, right? They're experienced folks, but they're finally, choosing to retire here. You can't you can't find enough people to come in who want to take their place. There's competition for jobs from everyone. And for anybody you do hire, the wages have gone up, right? So it's more expensive. So your budget may get maxed out sooner than what you thought. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, as we now know, because of the low interest rates and the huge spike in construction, in the Southeast and Southwest, there's been a tremendous amount of like new units coming onto the market, right? And so there's oversupply in some markets, right? You're not generating as much revenue. Labor rates are going up. Cost of materials, insurance, as we know, has gone up dramatically. Hopefully it's like flatlining. That's kind of what I'm reading in the headlines, right? But so less revenue, more expense, right? More OpEx. It's kind of it's a recipe for, pressure at the property level. Those are the reasons why I think centralization is attractive to people, because they're looking for ways to, again, offset the increased expense and the kind of flat to declining rent, right? To try and maintain NOI growth. Centralization has been around for a while in one form or another, right? Like in terms of your accounting system. In some cases, the property manager was like inputting all the expenses and all this, right? And in other cases, it was being done at the head office, right? At the corporate office. In some cases, they're managing vendors locally in terms of, the COI and all these things. In other cases, you're using a vendor management platform and everybody who's a vendor has to put their information into it. So now it's like those were things that have been going on for a while in the industry. Now it's really getting to the level at the property level. And when you look at companies like UDR, they decided to go self-guided touring, right? Everywhere. Their philosophy is we're not going to have anybody on site on the leasing team. Avalon Bay is with their Canso brand. It's designed to really be kind of more workforce housing focused. And so therefore, all right, how do we automate how those Canso buildings are being managed, right? In such a way that I don't need to have the 1-to-100 ratio on site. And so I think everybody is exploring different ways, right, to get more efficiency, because again, you can't hire enough people or you've got pressure on your NOI. And so one strategy that some people employ is let's go to this pod structure where if I'm fortunate enough to have co-located properties, geographically co-located properties, right? I can have one guy, I can break that 1-to-100 kind of ratio and have one maintenance person serving 3 buildings as opposed to 3 maintenance guys. Or maybe 2 maintenance guys serving 3 buildings, right? Depending on the size and so forth. So that type of pod structure can only be operationalized if you have the technology in place at the property level to facilitate the ability for them to let in third-party vendors or unit turn vendors, right? Or emergency repair vendors remotely. But do it in a way that you're confident about their ability to get around the building, right? So you don't feel like you're opening up a can of worms, but you can do it in a way that you can manage it efficiently, that it's documented, that they only go where they need to go. This is why I think smart access, which we started out talking about, can play such a role in helping operationalize these centralization strategies. Because I'll tell you, I was at OpTech, this was like 3 years ago, and I'm looking around at all the banners hanging off of the ceiling there. And I was like, wow, self-guided touring. You need smart access for that. Smart maintenance requests. Well, you need smart access for that. Amenity reservations. You need smart access for that. All these things really require access, right, in order to get operationalized. So the fact that you can have one platform allows you to really implement these like labor saving strategies, which help offset all the headwinds being faced by the industry, right? So, and one other thing I should mention is like, look, we are now about to launch cameras in Q3 of this year. So now you have security cameras around the property. Those can now be part of your ButterflyMX platform. So what's very exciting is in terms of like remote management, right? We're thinking this is going to open up a whole new world of possibilities. And I'm glad I can see you smiling a little bit. because it's like, somebody who's deep in that world, you probably go like, awesome.
Absolutely. I picked up on something that you're saying when you were describing centralization in maintenance and what it looks like in most cases. A central team that services more than one location. So if we go back to the previous situation that I just described, where everybody's struggling managing keys, like, going back and forth, like handing keys, returning keys. Imagine doing that and also having to travel between sites. In other words, you have the service technician that just did a couple of work orders at property A, and then he needs to travel down the street to property B, sometimes for an emergency. The mindset is, I got to get to that emergency. And while he's doing that, he has keys from property A in his pocket. How much disturbance that creates, disruption in the process. So with that being said, I always said that if you really want to have a seamless centralization experience, or at least to have a chance at doing a decent one, access control management has to be done as a prerequisite. Like if your property is not set up with access control that could be managed from a person's phone, you had to really reconsider doing that, because absolutely that's your only way to succeed. You're not going to be succeeding by chasing keys down to one property to like doing that to 2 or 3 or more properties. It's a recipe for a disaster, for chaos.
100%. I mean, look, this is why electronic access is just so important, right? Is because when somebody is done with something, the key expires, right? There's no having to get a key back because the key doesn't work anymore, right? And so you've eliminated all that chasing down. I was at a property in New Jersey and we met the owner, and, he was considering using ButterflyMX. He just mentioned how, every month, one of his maintenance people had to meet the fire alarm or the sprinkler inspector, right? And it was just like he spent an hour driving to this property to meet this guy, to let him in, and then would have to stay there while the guy was wandering around the property. This was crazy. There was no need to do this. We could solve that problem. And so what happened actually, by the way, is like the guy had a portfolio of 4 different buildings, right? He ended up adopting ButterflyMX throughout because there was just such immediate cost savings for him in terms of how the maintenance people were able to operate much, much more efficiently and get more done during the end of the day. And like, look, again, this is about kind of, you want to be done with a maintenance request, right? In the best case scenario, maintenance requests, get scheduled by the resident. The technician is able to show up, take care of things when the resident wants it taken care of. When you have to reschedule because you're having to do key management or drive to another building to take care of an emergency or whatever the reason is, it just starts to create friction. You want people to basically release their existing apartment because, number one, if you have to re-rent an apartment in certain markets today, you're not getting the same rent you got a year ago, right? It's actually coming down or certainly staying flat in the best case scenario. The other thing is, if you have to release an apartment, you're incurring $1,000 or $2,000 in like marketing and commissions and all kinds of other expenses, right? So you want to create a great resident experience where the building is responsive to their needs, right? And there's always some sort of maintenance request that's going to happen. So to the extent that we can help make that more efficient and run more smoothly, again, I go to flow like water out of a tap, right? Like that's the goal in terms of the experience for the resident, and as well as assisting the on-site team, in particular like the maintenance team, in achieving that goal, right? Then you're going to have happy residents and they're going to re-up on their leases, and it becomes this positive cycle, right? So that's really our goal. And the reason that we've expanded every part of the building is because, again, a unified system facilitates that versus something that you have 2 or 3 different electronic systems operating kind of independently, or there's an integration, but it's never as good as people say it's going to be, right? So, and now with cameras, we've kind of given you the ability now to pair a door release event with a small video clip. And so now you have even more insight into how people going around the property and using the asset.
Cyrus, I want you to take us into the future and share a little bit about your vision about smart access role into multifamily's future, and maybe in particular into centralization, because that's going to be an integral part, must be, of centralization, but into the multifamily future in general. Where do you see this heading?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the future is an integrated future, right? So when I look out 5 or 10 years time, the chiller goes out at 3 in the morning. I think a work order is getting generated automatically that's going to your vendor or your service provider there, right? The maintenance tech gets the ticket. That maintenance tech has already been pre-approved to get into the building because a background check was done on them. They're in the database. And then their scheduling system says, okay, this is the time we can get on site. And it communicates with ButterflyMX, which then gives them the access credential. And when they get to the building, what happens is they can get into the front entrance. They can get up the key fobbed elevator, right? They can then use our access platform to get onto the bulkhead, right? And they're able to now work on the chiller. In the meantime, the property manager, maybe they get a notification and they see it while they're sleeping, or maybe they wake up in the morning and they go, oh, there's a maintenance tech on the roof who's working on the chiller, right? And all of this is being done in an automatic way that allows really buildings to be automated in such a way where technology is doing all this kind of routine work, so that really what the on-site maintenance guy, he's going there to QC what the guy is working on at the time, right? He's focused on using all of his IP, his years of experience, right, to check on things, but he doesn't actually have to worry about any of the scheduling and the key management and back and forth. And so it's really about helping people be their best selves, as the saying goes, right? Where it's like the tasks that they're undertaking are the most value added, not the things that are kind of routine and rote and can be automated using technology. So I think that's where the future is. And I think it all becomes about kind of making jobs better. And as a result, kind of delivering a better product and a better experience to residents, right? But as a result, also having a better resident experience.
Well, we already see that in hospitality, honestly. Whether you go to a 7-star hotel or 2-star hotel, access control it's been automated for decades. At that point, it's an even playing field. They've been implementing this regardless of how many stars, like how high quality or low quality of a product it's out there available for guests. I think it's just a matter of time for us to embrace it in multifamily.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I mean, as I said, when you ask me about, if you have an older asset, how easy is it to retrofit? That's why, a big part of what we try and do on a day-to-day basis, right, in terms of our, solutions architecture team, but also as we develop new products, is how do you make this easier in order to retrofit it into a property so that more properties can benefit from these things? How do you drive down the installation cost? How do you remove the friction by supporting property managers, by being the guys who coordinate all the installation? You save all that back and forth and the time it takes normally to coordinate something. We take that upon ourselves. We're doing that because, as I said, our motto is access made simple, right? So we try and do that in every single aspect, whether it's user experience using a mobile app, whether it's getting onboarded onto the platform, or whether it's getting installed, right? And again, this goes back from being consumer centric, right? It was all about being intuitive, easy to use, and something that's going to enhance your life and make it better.
Cyrus, what we should expect from ButterflyMX as far as new products, new services on the market within the near future? What are some great things you could share with us?
Don't want to let too much of the cat out of the bag, but I will say the following. So as I mentioned, we're launching cameras in Q3. That's the next big product category. Like I said, we do the unit locks, we do parking, we do common access, and of course our intercom. After that, what you're going to see is we've been developing different workflows. We have amenity space reservations. We launched a self-guided touring platform, right, that allows you to go in and tour various units. We're working on some things in your area of expertise around, vendor management and so on. Every company out there, it's very important to be studying how you can implement AI in terms of your operational workflows, both internally, but also externally, right? So we're very excited about what our product team is actually working on in terms of how to transform the resident experience in terms of how they interact with the platform, how they can send out virtual keys and do a whole host of other kind of exciting things with ButterflyMX to make access simpler. Very excited. Much more to come. And, there's some other pieces of hardware that we're going to be adding down the road after we've kind of completed the camera rollout. So a lot is always going on. And, we appreciate our customers always coming to us and saying, we want more and can you do this? So everything's very exciting these days.
Cyrus, it's been an amazing conversation. Great to have you here with us today. What are some final thoughts? What are some final thoughts that you would like to share with our audience that we didn't cover during this hour?
Well, Adrian, I've been thinking about centralization for many years now. I'm really excited that, we've gotten to a point in terms of the market is very interested in how they can operate buildings more efficiently. And I think that this just takes some maturation in terms of people's thinking, people on the part of ownership, in terms of people who are in the on-site teams having experience with seeing operating efficiency and then saying, I want to see this at another building, or can you give me more? And, now that ButterflyMX offers what we call our unified access platform, or the end-to-end solution, right, that covers every door, we have been providing this solution to our customers, and the feedback has been tremendously positive in terms of how it really changes the way people are working in buildings and how users manage their lives, right? What I would say is please stay tuned for more. Please reach out to us, at sales@butterflymx.com to find out more. Schedule a demo. Let us show you exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it. By the way, you had asked me before, do we have anything that shows like the ROI? Yes, we have a white paper actually we can share with you. And so really look forward to continuing to be supportive of building owners, supportive of residents and property managers and maintenance teams, and just being part of this industry ecosystem that is really driving change in terms of how buildings are operated and how they're lived in.
Cyrus, thanks again for being with us today. It's been amazing having you on. And I hope to get you back here soon for another conversation.
Love to. And thank you, Adrian. It's been a real pleasure getting to know you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Adrian Danila, your host. This was another great episode of Multifamily Chronicles, another great conversation. I hope to see you back here soon. Have an amazing day.